Hello and welcome to the 8th King's Alan Turing Lecture, which is one of the highlights of our college calendar. I can see that by the fact that the auditorium is pretty much standing room only, and I believe we have a lot of people watching online. So welcome to all of you. It's great to have you. We're going to have questions afterwards for Sandi Toksvig, who of course is our speaker this year. But just to say a couple of words about the lecture. We started it back in 2017 to really celebrate the extraordinary life of Alan Turing, who was, of course, a member of the King's community and developed so much of his thinking and his career here at King's. He wasn't just a truly brilliant scientist and cryptographer and mathematician and neuroscientist and someone who contributed in such an incredible way to the outcome of World War II, which of course we are remembering today. He was also somebody who really cuts to the core of why we at King's are so proud to champion inclusivity and diversity in all its forms. Because, as you all know, he was someone who was gay, he was horribly persecuted, and what makes it doubly ironic was that at King's he felt tolerated and embraced, so much so that he was actually unaware of how the wider world would see him, and that of course led to the tragedy of his life. I don't know how many of you got a chance to go and see the incredible archival display that we had earlier today, put together by Patricia. I don't know if Patricia's here, but it's a truly amazing demonstration. And if you missed it, you should be sorry, because when you look at all of his letters and his diaries, they are not just a testament to his brilliance, but they're also incredibly moving in showing who he was as a person and the utter tragedy of his life. So we've always wanted to capture all these different aspects when we honour him each year in the lecture. And I can't, frankly, think of a better person to be chosen as this year's lecturer, because she's very well known to all of you as a broadcaster. She, in fact, she had an OBE for services to broadcasting back in 2014. She's also a very vocal, and I should say effective, political activist, co-founding the Women's Equality Party in 2015. And 2 years ago, she got the university's first Q+ fellowship, which lets LGBTQ+ alumni come back to Cambridge to pursue research projects, which she did, sadly not at King's, but at Christ's. And I'm delighted. Well, forgive you, Christ. We got the head of the Master of Christ here today, so it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for coming. But she has a great long-standing bond with Cambridge. She did Arc and Anth, like me, many years ago, and law at Girton. She's an honorary fellow of 3 colleges and a bi-fellow at Christ now. And early this spring, she gave a fantastic standing room only lecture at Darwin. And I think, as you all know, she's also put a hat in the ring to become the next chancellor in the upcoming election, chancellor of the university. So, no pressure. We look forward to a fascinating lecture, and as I say, at the end of it, there's going to be a chance for Q&A. And I'll just say a very quick note of thanks to all of you who helped arrange this year's lecture, because it really is a fantastic opportunity to not just celebrate Alan Turing, but also to hear from somebody whose own life story exemplifies so much of what we're celebrating today. Thank you.
Hello, I quite like standing against the piano. I might just do a few tunes instead. They're very good. I am going to talk about bias in... Oh, no, so the thing has... Oh, there we go. I'm going to talk about bias in discovery. Most specifically, I'm going to talk about sexist and racist bias. But the thing is to say right from the beginning, you don't need to take any of it seriously, because I am probably hysterical. Okay, and that's because I'm not entirely sure at this moment where my womb is. Now, this admission is not how you usually start a Cambridge lecture, I realise, and I do hope that no one will get an old-fashioned fit of the vapours. just checking everybody's okay. I asked this because I've had trouble before with any hint of mentioning my reproductive parts. When I was a student, as was mentioned, at Girton here in Cambridge, between my second and my third years, I became extremely ill. I had to have life-saving surgery, and the doctors advised that I take a year off. Don't go and do my third year, but that's not really my style, slowing down. So I returned to college weighing, honestly, about 6 stone, with a medical note to say that I was not to be put under any stress whatsoever. My then girlfriend, a former president of the Girton JCR, came to visit me and stay the night, because obviously she was concerned about me. She didn't tell anybody she was coming because she felt she still belonged. She'd been the president. Anyway, it was 1979 and somebody reported us. This so horrified several elderly fellows that they tried to send me down. And the entire college council discussed it for 3 weeks before deciding that I could stay because of my excellent academic record. So, first life hack for you all from this talk: if you must be gay, do at least be clever. So I stayed, but lots of college members never spoke to me again. I think they thought maybe that shunning me might force me to leave of my own accord, but instead I concluded my last year in can only be described as a twilight world of defiance. Not excluded, but definitely not included either. So, as you can imagine, not a lot of fun. So when I am asked to stand in the spotlight and give a lecture, I have to tell you, it still amazes. So even more amazing, last month I opened a new library and English centre for our local secondary school. What a fantastic, a huge honour. I have to say, every day in my life is not like that. I have also, in my time, presented the Aluminium Replacement Window Awards, so... but it's true. The school event stood out. So it's a fabulous building in a state school, and they wanted to name it after a local author, which rather overwhelmingly turned out to be me. So there it is. Thank God Richard Osman doesn't live nearby. I mean, it would have been... So I stood in front of the Toksvig building, and I looked across the tarmac at the science block, which, as it happens, is named after Alan Turing. The two buildings form a centrepiece for the school. Now, obviously, I never met Turing. He died 4 years before I was born, but I like to think we would have got on. I don't know if you know this, but the very first computer used mercury to store memory, so none of your sleek Apple devices. So it ran on mercury through yards and yards of scaffolding pipe. But the mercury was very, very expensive. So Turing proposed using gin instead, because it had rather similar properties. It didn't take off, but I love the idea that we very nearly had early computers run on cocktails. I just think it's... What a great guy. So I stood in the schoolyard and I smiled as I looked at his name. There we were, two gay people facing each other in the hopes of inspiring youngsters. And I wondered what he would think about where the queer community have all got to in British life. So he died, as I'm sure you know, aged 41, a victim of societal judgment. And in his honour, I decided I wanted to talk about how bias and sometimes outright prejudice can get in the way of human beings advancing in the way of making discoveries. Too often, all of us, I think it doesn't really matter what subject we are pursuing, we can get in our own way of having a new thought. So, bias and prejudice, obviously not the same thing, and I know that because I own these books right here. Now, I don't know what the etiquette is about mentioning Oxford in this place, but I've already indicated I'm a lesbian. I feel we're on a roll. So, this Oxford English Dictionary was my requested birthday present for my 18th birthday. So I had a plan. My plan was I was going to become a human rights lawyer. And part of the way forward was an unbelievably naive desire to clearly define the world by using these books. If I didn't know what something meant, if I didn't understand something, I could look it up. There's over 600,000 words, 3.5 million illustrative quotations from over 1,000 years of English history. Begun in 1857 and finally published in 1928. This, pleasingly, as I had to bring it on the train from Hampshire, is the shorter version. And it tells me that bias and prejudice, of the two, prejudice is, It's the more hardcore, where somebody has a preconceived notion about a person or a group, often unfounded and based on stereotypes or generalizations. It's the sort of thing, for example, might cause an American politician to believe that immigrants are the sort of people who eat dogs. That's the kind of thing. That's prejudice. It's pretty much always negative. And I would suspect most people in this room think it's not for them, and that's good. Why, we're all smart enough to be here, so hopefully unlikely to hold entrenched, often factually unsupported views. Bias, we might admit to. I think we could possibly admit to that. It's a little bit less forceful, isn't it? More of a tendency to like or dislike something based on personal preferences or experiences or beliefs. I think it can be a very positive thing. I am biased towards red wine and dark chocolate, and thank goodness science has declared both are good for you. So this is a good bias. I do have, which I confess to, I have a complete bias against stupidity. I just don't care for it. I really don't. And there's such a lot of it around. Who decided to charge the Apple wireless mouse like this? Who thought that was... So I try not to act on my bias if I can. I always try to back up my inclinations with facts. So when I looked, for example, Donald Trump's recent method of calculating tariffs, I was inclined to believe he was not good at maths, and I backed this up with a statement that he made in 1989 when he said, I tell you, it's big business. If there's one word to describe Atlantic City, it's big business. Or two words, it's two words. Both bias and prejudice can be conscious or unconscious, and they influence our thoughts and our decisions and our actions, and you all know this. And maybe you all think to yourself, I'm not sexist or homophobic. Why, I went to that talk with that lesbian off the telly. So that's great. But perhaps feeling personally triumphant stops us confronting how ingrained some unfair and misguided views might be in the very fabric of society. So deeply ingrained, in fact, that lots of us stop noticing. And when that happens, it can't but help but hinder our ability to be objective in our intent, for example, to understand the world better, or, which my dream, to, in some very small way, actually manage to improve the place. So for today, I thought I'd come up with what was really a neat title, Cutting Discovery on the Bias. So here's the thing, apart from being here and writing books and so on, I do a lot of sewing and weaving, right? When you weave, which people have been doing since the ancient Egyptians first, I think they finished the pyramids and thought, let's make ourselves a nice linen suit to celebrate. So for those of you who've not had the pleasure, you construct cloth by weaving warp and weft threads. So the warp threads, they run vertically, while the weft threads run horizontally, perpendicular. And a bias cut is a technique used by clothing makers to cut fabric at a diagonal angle across the weave of the fabric, the grain. So a true bias grain it runs diagonally at 45 degrees across the weave. And basically it eliminates some of the tension from the weave and gives the materials more softness, elasticity. Ooh, it's like Stella McCartney was in the room. So I give a lot of these talks. Now, you may think I'm an idiot because I write them myself. I know that's not the modern way. But despite 45 hard years of show business, I also do my own PowerPoint. I know, it's a little overwhelming. I've never used any form of AI assistance, but I thought I would try one of those image generators to come up with a poster design. So I inputted my rather neat title, and the first thing I got was this. That was followed by this. And this, well, I can't even work out what the thought was. I don't know. And finally this, which made me hungry, so I gave up and went to lunch. I tried several AI image generators. They all had this in common. Clearly, whoever had put together the algorithms had no thought of sewing or weaving anywhere in their catalogue of possibilities. What I got was quite a lot of butch pictures of what cutting looks like. And in the end, the AI picture I chose was this because it was the nicest, not because it has anything to do with my title. This is the picture generated by the words cutting discovery on the bias. What is that girl? What is she holding, a handbag or a lacrosse stick? I don't know what's happening. Can I just say, that was not the worst one, okay? Here is the best image it managed to create of a lesbian. been a lesbian for a really long time. I mean, I thought I had the hang of it. I don't really know what's happening here. So weirdly, all of these images sort of made my point before I'd even started. So in Scandinavia, sewing and weaving and knitting, they're known as the grandmother crafts, and they are most often seen as a female preoccupation. And they do not, as you can see, interest AI image generators. So these generators are trained on data, which we know too often it reflects gender stereotypes. So if you teach a machine by showing it examples from the past, the training images will carry bias. So bias works for cloth, but it doesn't work for diversity. So if you ask AI generators for a random image of, say, a journalist, you get this, an author, you get this, chief executive, that's scary, carer, you get this. Boys' jobs, girls' jobs. The truth is, despite years of campaigns for equality, we are too often presented with a world divided in binary ways. So, for example, masculine and feminine, with a lot of, very agitated debate if anybody suggests there might just be a grey area between this black and white divide. And then the other divisions, which are also often seen as male or female, so public and private, the old notion that the male operates in the public sphere, the female is in charge of the private. Clearly, you see this most starkly in Afghanistan, where the Taliban has now ordered that new residential buildings are constructed without windows looking onto places usually used by women, and that existing windows with such views be blocked to prevent what they call obscene acts. Economic and social, which I define as, oh, no, I leave the entertaining to my wife. Then you get paid and unpaid. So in England and Wales, women provide the bulk of unpaid care, much more likely to reduce their working hours in order to do so. Research in Scotland has found that women are twice as likely as men to give up paid work in order to do caring duties. I also added the grandmother crafts, which, for the sake of alliteration, I've called knotting and knitting, which I'm very pleased with. And then, of course, productive and reproductive. So let's start with the latter, okay? So some people are surprised, some people are appalled to discover that I am also a mother, and indeed a grandmother of 4. But here's the thing. I haven't actually physically given birth, which means as I stand here, my womb is probably wandering all over the place. Right, let me explain. Let's head back to ancient Egypt, at the year 1800 BCE, when somebody, probably wearing a very nice linen suit, sat down to write the Kahun Gynecological Papyrus. It is the oldest known medical text, and it focuses on women's health. Clearly, I think you can see from this picture, borrowed by someone from the library who didn't take sufficient care. It's very obsessed with the womb. It's very obsessed with the womb as a source of pretty much all female ailments, with excellent descriptions of terror of the womb, which I thought sounded like a marvellous horror film. So I got, obviously, one of the AI image generators to make a poster for me. There it is. The thing I discovered, which I really recommend, when you get an image made, there's always a written description accompanying them. The written description of this one is, person with a red ball. I like a lot. You will know that the term hysteria derives from the Greek word hystera, meaning uterus. And from the moment anybody wrote down anything about women's bodies and behaviours, any abnormalities were more likely than not attributed to the reproductive system. So from the beginning of medicine, female hysteria was considered common and chronic in women. So Plato compared the uterus to a living creature that wanders throughout a woman's body, blocking passages, obstructing breathing, and causing disease. He said the uterus itself became sad when not joined with the male, and those other toga wearers, Aristotle and Hippocrates, plus later many generations of medical men, would go on to agree. So the cures people came up with, they varied depending on how society were viewing women at the time. They ranged from sexual abstinence or, paradoxically, to sexual activity. Sex, anyway. Sex was, one way or another, was the answer. And early therapeutic measures depended on where the physician thought the uterus had got to and how best to get it back where it belonged. So if the uterus had moved upwards, you could tempt it back down by placing smelly, acrid things near the woman's mouth and nostril, and that would make it go down, or nice scents near her vagina, like that. There's no record of whether this worked at all, none. The mythical Greek healer Melampus declared women's madness came from refusing to honour the phallus, not having enough orgasms, and uterine melancholy. You just know I asked for an image. I got this. The basic presumption of all of these early quacks was that women were generally smaller, not brave, in need of being ruled by men, effectively having their reproductive organs regularly skewered into place was the only way forward. In his History of Animals, Aristotle wrote, "Man's nature is the most complete. Hence a wife is more compassionate than her husband, more given to tears, but also more jealous and complaining and more apt to scold and fight. The female is also more dispirited and despondent than the male, more shameless and lying, is readier to deceive and has a longer memory." I mean, it goes on. Basically, we're not great. That's what I'm saying to you. Aristotle saw the female body as being the inverse of the male, with its genitalia turned outside, which was clearly faulty or certainly deficient. The only thing which made this dodgy kit worthwhile was the uterus. Yay! The ability to bear and raise children was the female purpose, and all knowledge about female biology centered around this capacity. Women's lives were ruled by their reproductive organs, and any troubles, she could trace it right back to the big red ball. So this ancient idea, this was conceived long before the concept of any evidence-based science, yet over 2 millennia, many in the medical profession saw no reason to dispute it. The Victorians were mad for the uterus. Look at this guy. Can I just say, I very much like the AI description of this picture. It says, a person kneeling on his knee and kneeling on his knee. Yeah, nothing else is happening here. Look away, nothing else is happening. More than 2,300 years after Aristotle's death, his depiction of the feeble female is still influential. Are we still hysterical? Definitely, because study after study shows that women in pain are much more likely to be referred to a therapist, while a man will get painkillers. And here is where we must consider intersectionality, because this bias is, of course, magnified if the woman is a person of colour or disabled or a member of the LGBT+ community, or, heaven forfend, all three. So according to a 2023 report by the House of Commons Women and Equalities Committee, and I quote, the UK has one of the lowest maternal mortality ratios in the world. There are, however, glaring and persistent disparities in outcomes for women depending on their ethnicity. Maternal mortality for black women is currently almost 4 times higher than white women. Significant disparities also exist for women of Asian and mixed ethnicities. Interestingly, the picture my PowerPoint AI designer wanted to add to this text was this: black hands holding a map of Africa made of traditional beads. I mentioned black women, I was talking about the UK, but it was clearly too much for the image generator, so we got this African picture. So let's just focus a little bit on what I just quoted. 4 times higher. Why? When many of the pregnancy and birth complications killing black women are preventable, things like preeclampsia. The appalling answer seems to be that it is because black women are not treated with enough care and attention when they report their pain. 2 weeks ago, the Department of Health and Social Care released the findings from the largest ever survey of women's reproductive health. It found that 1 in 4 women in England have a serious reproductive health issue. The researchers estimated that there are about 10 million women in this country battling against conditions such as fibroids and endometriosis, and that, and I quote, a systemic, operational, structural and cultural issues are preventing women from accessing care. It's bias, most distressingly, The survey once more also revealed stark ethnic inequalities. Now, I don't really know a woman who hasn't at some point had pelvic pain. Yet when you look through all the medical archives, honestly, it's not really mentioned. Historically, hardly anybody thought, oh, menstrual pain, must make a note of that. More a case of, I don't know what we call it, the shrug of history. But it must have been there. It must have been there because the old pharmacy recipe books, Materia Medicas, this one is from 1749, there are endless concoctions to deal with it. So there's something to make it better, but nobody wants to write down the actual condition. There's a late 13th century medical manuscript referred to as MS Ashmole 399, in which you can find images of a woman apparently doubled over in pain. Now, according to the experts, she's suffering from what was usually called at the time strangulation or suffocation of the womb. Most likely, she had endometriosis. It's a chronic, incurable disease where endometrial tissue grows and spreads in other places in the body. Known about it for centuries, only named it about 100 years ago. It's an illness lost in the footnotes, which continues to blight the lives of millions of women. Generations of suffering yet to be cured. And instead, women were told that they were not coping because their uterus hadn't had enough attention from men, because endometriosis was associated with delayed childbearing. Well into the 1990s, it was called the career woman's disease. One of the greatest misdiagnoses in human history, which left women in physical, psychological pain and sometimes committed to the madhouse. So, overall, women make fewer visits to the GP, receive less health monitoring, are half as likely to receive painkillers after surgery, and are much more likely to die of a heart attack, as I discovered when my wife had one, and I was told by the receptionist in A&E to sit down. She was having a panic attack. Now, were I not so versed on the symptoms women do suffer from a heart attack, which are different to the ones suffered by men, she might now be dead. The truth is, she wasn't panicking, I was. There is robust science and data around implicit bias. There's just no agreement about what to do about it. It seems to have sprung from a patriarchal view laid down in ancient Greece, are still hanging about. For decades, women were excluded from clinical drug trials based in part on unfounded concerns that female hormone fluctuations made women difficult to study. It became the norm to exclude the female to the extent that even in cell and animal studies, subjects have been predominantly male. Dr. Janine Austin-Clayton, who's the director of the US Office of Research on Women's Health, says, we literally know less about every aspect of female biology compared to male biology. If we want better information, we might as well read what some of you will know is my favorite book of all time, Everything I Know About Women I Learned from My Tractor. So in truth, we know very little about female biology. Yet that doesn't stop some people from being adamant, rather like Aristotle, that they know what makes a woman. And I understand that. I completely understand it. It makes it easier, I think, sometimes to divide the world into neat blocks, black and white, night and day, male and female. But here's the thing. I wonder if life isn't actually a bit more interesting than that. So look at this. Is this day or night? This is really hard to say, isn't it? It's actually, this is lovely, it's what's known as civil twilight. It's the period when enough natural light remains that artificial light is not needed. So the descent of day into night, it's not precise. It depends who you are, where you are, and why you want to know. Let's try something a bit more clear-cut. Are these male or female creatures? Well, actually, they're all hermaphrodite. So clownfish, all born male, and then the most dominant male turns female, and then if she dies, the dominant male second in command will change sex to replace her, ensuring the school's survival, something Disney failed to celebrate, I feel. Bearded dragons can be genetically male, but take on the role and reproductive capability of the female. And wrasse-fish, one of my favourites, they go the opposite direction from the clownfish. When the dominant male of a school dies, or even just leaves for a while, the largest female will immediately transform into the new lead male. This entails growing male sexual organs within 2 weeks. I mean, it's a lot, isn't it? Imagine if you had to get new trousers every 2 weeks. So, nature teaches us that there is a glorious spectrum of life, of light, and of lived experience. Before Turing took his own life, he was engaged in studying the appearance of mathematical patterns in nature, particularly in plant sequences, in plant structures. He's very interested in the Fibonacci sequence, which looks like this and which you can find in nature like that. You find it throughout the natural world. So the sequence is found, I'm sure you know, by adding the first two numbers together and then the next and so on and so on. And he was fascinated by how it was found in stems and leaves and seeds in the spiral arrangements of structures like sunflower heads. So we'll never know exactly what was in his head, exactly where he was heading with this work, but I'm drawn to his desire to comprehend the world by a closer understanding of nature. So I'm sure you can imagine I felt unbelievably alone and isolated as a student. 1979, there were no LGBT plus groups. There was no one I could talk to. Finding any history was absolutely impossible. Although I have to say, I always paused in a woman's biography when it said, she never married. I was like, oh, was that a thing? I don't know. And how I should have loved to have known that same-sex behavior is a nearly universal phenomenon in the animal kingdom. It's common across all species. So those who continue to be homophobic will tell you that it is irrelevant because we're not animals. It's not the same. We have consciousness. We go to lectures. Look at us. It's marvelous. We're a higher being. We are in charge. We can do all sorts of things that animals can't. Excuse me. We can do all sorts of things animals can't, like open the fridge, fire a gun, destroy the planet, pass the port, right way round, all of these things. And we can verbalise what we are thinking. So the question has to be, what do we do, all of us, with this cognitive brilliance? Why we become judgmental and develop systemic oppressions. One thing that seems to be exclusive to humans is homophobia. I've quoted scientific studies, but of course we need to remember that scientists themselves are not immune from bias. These are a genuine list of titles from science papers of the past dealing with same-sex behaviour. So here we are, sexual perversion in male beetles, disturbances of the sexual sense in baboons, aberrant sexual behaviour in the South African ostrich, abnormal sexual behaviour of confined female long-eared hedgehogs, and my absolute favourite, a note on the apparent lowering of moral standards in the Lepidoptera. It describes mature male Mazarine butterflies approaching and mating with male butterflies newly emerged from the chrysalis. I'm afraid that picture is gay butterfly porn. I do hope you're all coping. Some of these seem sort of quaintly old-fashioned. And I think part of considering where our biases lie is to allow that we might sometimes be wrong about things. So there are plenty of examples in the past, some of which Turing would have enjoyed. This is from Popular Mechanics. Computers in the future may weigh no more than 1.5 tons. Good news. Lord Kelvin, President of the Royal Society, heavier than air flying machines are impossible. Ernst Mach, Austrian physicist and philosopher, I can accept the theory of relativity as little as I can accept the existence of atoms and other such dogma. And my favourite, Charles Dewey, Commissioner in 1899 of the US Office of Patents, everything that can be invented has been invented. I believe that all of us, particularly in this glorious place, have a duty to be open to new ideas. Turing's thoughts were revolutionary, and the tragedy lies in wondering what else he might have conceived. So what a privilege all of us share in continuing to learn about the world, because we are making discoveries all the time. I get so excited when I find a new thing. Just last month, scientists announced that they had identified a new butterfly species. It is if you haven't seen it, it's the wonderfully named curiously isolated hair streak. And it has been found fluttering in the Canadian Rockies. And genetic analysis indicates that the species has been isolated from other butterflies and kept going via interbreeding for up to 40,000 years. It's been there all the time, and we didn't know. And I think the words, "I don't know," are an essential part of learning. Yet too often, particularly in the public space, there is not only certainty expressed about a polarised position, but it is accompanied by vitriol, fury, and unkindness. So the recent furore over the trans question, I won't dignify it by calling it a debate, saw on one side those who claimed to be victorious. They were popping champagne corks, gloating, while a tiny vulnerable minority quake at the door to prejudice which they felt had just been left wide open. When the British Medical Association last week called the recent Supreme Court decision scientifically illiterate, the response from the most vocal anti-trans figures was not to wonder why 50,000 presumably well-educated doctors who deal with human bodies all day might think that, but instead to call the doctors a disgrace to their profession. Is sex on a spectrum? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Maybe. I am inclined to think so. Look at us in this room. We do not look at all binary. One weekend, my wife and I were in Copenhagen. We came across a shop. It was a bizarre shop. It offered to photograph our eyes. I don't know how such a shop manages, but we did it, so that's how it manages. I don't know. It was bizarre. So this is a photograph of my wife Debbie's and my right eyes. Mine is the pale, Scandi one at the bottom, and hers is the much more attractive golden one. So we're both women, we're both white women, we're educated white women, we're privileged, we're well cared for, we're lesbians, yet look how different something so fundamental is in our makeup. There are nearly 8 billion people in the world, yet every single fingerprint, every iris is unique, no two people are the same. There aren't even 2 identical experiences of the same event. Why would anybody think humanity can easily be divided into 2 camps with absolutely no exceptions? I think we're more interesting than that. So we used to be taught, you may be taught this at school, that humans were either XX or XY. But once more, I'm just going to say, know your science. The fact is there is a wide range of chromosomal types beyond the familiar XX and XY, intersex traits of every kind. And estimates vary, but the general reckoning is that about 1.5% of the population worldwide are intersex, so neither fully male nor female, and it is not the same as hermaphrodite. So millions of people around the world, sexual characteristics do not fit typical binary notions of male and female bodies. There's an enormous range of natural variations that affect genitals, gonads, hormones, chromosomes, reproductive organs. So once again, world not black and white. This is not, of course, what the Supreme Court seemed to suggest, yet there was a very curious aspect to their judgment. My first part of the tripos here as an undergraduate was a law tripos, and we were taught the essential Latin instruction for justice to be achieved, which is audi alterum partem, which states that both sides must be heard. And ironically, the court overlooked this binary requirement. Not a single trans person gave evidence. Social scientists describe a common human weakness as the fundamental attribution error. So this is where you judge somebody because of a single action. You pushed in front of me at the cafe, you must be a horrific human being. And in many instances, human beings have become intolerant of error. So intolerant that we feel it's okay to dismiss somebody without further investigation. And I have to say the media, they make very little room for thoughtful discourse. So a politician who's listened to criticism and thinks, maybe I'll respond to that, is said always to have performed a humiliating U-turn. Stick to your guns, even if at some point you realise you must be horribly wrong, because you'll do better in the papers. This fundamental attribution error, I think it can happen to groups of people, and it has certainly happened to the trans community. And too often the anti-trans argument seems more concerned about maintaining the boundaries, so the boundaries between us and them, than with the truth. Women are not safe in toilets from trans people, they say, and when asked for proof, they point to 1 or 2 individuals who've not behaved well. There is no swathe of data to back up this claim. It's a bit like saying, all men are fascists, look at that one who invaded Poland. Okay, it's a similar kind of thing. And too often, the argument also falls apart. The Conservative leader, when asked last week to consider the impact on trans people of the recent ruling, replied that they could simply now use disabled toilets. I honestly don't know how this has become the focus, but how is forcing trans women to use the men's toilets and trans men to use the women's toilets, or, I don't know, all trans people to use the disabled toilets, how is it going to increase anybody's safety? Least of all trans people. Sexual assaults against women and trans people happen everywhere, and they happen much too often. If anything, trans people are far more aware of this fact than most people because violence against them is exceptionally common. How I wish we could just have this sign, which I saw outside a public facility in my beloved Copenhagen. I love this. So I'm not asking you to agree with me. That's not what I'm saying. I'm asking you to think about it. And I don't just want to focus on the trans question. I want to consider why taking a binary position is becoming more and more overt. And in so many instances, we are moving towards a polarized society, a divided world where the media perpetuates things because a fight or a standoff, that's news, Democrats, Republicans, Tory, Labour, North Korea, the rest of the world. And for most part, what makes the news are the stark differences between ideologies. And we're encouraged to take sides. We're encouraged to, instead of doing what we should be doing, which is to take a minute, consider the facts, wait to make a choice. Instead, we're so quick to judge, often based on an argument carried out in senseless sound bites on social media. And the result is disdain and hatred, prejudice, ultimately violence and conflict, and quite a lot of stupidity, which you know is not my thing. The MAGA movement in the United States is keen not only on taking fierce standpoints, but making sure that the alternative arguments are just unheard or obliterated. This woman's T-shirt says, "Talking to you reminds me to clean my gun," as she screams at the world. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, refers to his state as a place where woke goes to die. Here, the Republican Party has passed the Stop Woke Act, a law which limits the discussion of racism in Florida schools. There's a program of eliminating books by LGBT and black authors from schools. It's been conducted by the Florida government and by vigilantes who call themselves woke busters. There have been nearly 16,000 book bans in public schools nationwide in the United States since 2021, a number not seen since the Red Scare McCarthy era of the 1950s, predominantly targeting books about race or racism, individuals of colour, books on LGBTQ topics. So the list includes James Joyce, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, of course, the terrible The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. And the current US federal government purge of anything related to DEI, I have to say it's also had an absurd side, which I enjoyed, when some images of the bomber which dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima in 1945 were purged from official records because the aircraft was called the Enola Gay. I mean, it's hilarious. Were it not for the fact that this is not just something that is happening far away. The Trump administration is now threatening UK universities who receive American funding if they continue any diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. We want appointments to be merit-based, they say, ignoring the part that privilege and gender and race and sexuality has always and continues to play. Research carried out by the UK's Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals found a third of libraries have been asked by members of the public to censor or remove books in this country. So what is the answer? Well, the first thing is to continue to stand up and be counted, however frightening that can sometimes be. And then to try, where we can, all of us in our varied fields, to seek the areas where we agree, to start with that, to start with the commonalities. And one of the ways we do that is through creativity. Exploring creative solutions helps us to explicitly innovate. So when you try and make connections in a new way, your brain will work extra hard to come up with solutions that linear thinking probably won't solve. So I had a problem, which I came to Cambridge to solve. In my third year here at Cambridge, I had become disillusioned with the idea of human rights law because the professor who led the charge against me was in the law department. So I moved to study archaeology and anthropology, where I was taught a great deal about hunter-gatherer societies in which, fundamentally, if you don't know, men went out looking for bison and women sat home picking herbs. That's pretty much the overview of it. Now, you don't have to be an anthropologist to have come across the theory that in the beginning, men hunted and women stayed at home too weak to be able to lift a club. Man the Hunter, AI, had no trouble with at all. That was the easy one. So this notion of gender division of labour in prehistoric times, this has led to endless cod evolutionary theories about female inferiority, a sexual division of labour and an unequal division of power which exists today, so must have always been like that. The trouble is we know better now. We know better than when I was studying. We now know that women are physiologically better suited to pursue prey on foot over long distances. Why would they not use that skill? And archaeological evidence is mounting to suggest a very different story. In 2020, excavations in Peru at the Andean highland site of Willamaya Pachax revealed a 9,000-year-old human burial associated with a hunting toolkit of stone projectiles and animal processing tool. The hunter buried alongside was female, woman, the hunter. Here's a book which I was given in 1978 when it was brand new. Part of my course, The Atlas of Man. Very pleased with itself, this volume. It's got a lovely introduction by the Prince of Wales. It's not actually, it has no maps, it's not really that kind of thing, but it purports to bring together in a single volume the basic information to help provide an understanding of the width and depth of the family of man. So theoretically, it's a marvellous book if you want to study patterns of behaviour in human societies and cultures. How are societies organised? Why do people do what they do? And presumably, it means everybody, all of us, not just the boys. But in all of the advertised width and depth of this book, it contains not one single indexed entry to women. Females get precisely 20 passing mentions. Well, it's published a long time ago. And that's okay, we know better now. Here's the thing, this is why I'm at Cambridge. We just don't. I came to Christ's College 2 years ago as the inaugural Q+ fellow, as mentioned, intent on seeing if a great hole in the world's bucket of knowledge could be repaired. So, as I'm sure you know, over the last 20 years, Wikipedia, largest collection of information in humanity's history. Woo! And it began as a marvellous noble enterprise, a community-created encyclopedia. We're going to gather information about notable people and events from all around the world, past and present. And when it was established, the aim was to freely share the sum of human information. What a marvellous, laudable, democratic thing. Theoretically, anybody can join in. And I have to say, the fact that not everybody takes it seriously is also sometimes amusing. I'm amused, I don't know if you know this, nearly half the pages in Wikipedia which deal with the Scots language were written by a teenager in North Carolina, editing under the username Amaryllis Gardner, who from ages of 12 to 19 just typed whatever he fancied with what he thought might be a Scottish accent. So the Scots Wikipedia entry on the Canada Goose, or Canada Goose, was at first honest about its provenance. There was a tag which warned, the Scots that was used in this article was written by a buddy that's mother tongue isna Scots. Please improve this article gin you can. But eventually he didn't even bother with that. He just carried on doing his Scottish thing. Some very good jokes done by people with time on their hands. And we come to the crux of the Wikipedia problem. If you design a body of knowledge to be crowdsourced, then you rely on contributors who've got the time, the technology. And this narrows down the creating community to one that is, and we know the demographics really clearly, predominantly white and male. Depending on which study you read, it can be as high as 90%. This is the story of humanity told through a single lens, and it reminds me of one of my favourite possessions. I have this hanging in my kitchen. This is a plate produced in 1915 in Denmark, which commemorates all the men who got women the vote. So if information flows through just one group, then of course the possibility of systemic bias arises. It is likely that such a group may replicate or even reinforce inequalities which, as you have seen, already exist in the real world. And studies presented to the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence found that while women were covered in many Wikipedia language editions, and I quote, the way women are portrayed starkly differs from the way men are portrayed. And the analysis looked at things like lexical bias. What sort of words describe notable women compared to men? And you can see daily examples of this. You don't need to look in Wikipedia. You can see it in our newspapers, our broadsheets, and our tabloids. Globally, women's stories make up less than a quarter of news reports. If a woman's story is by any chance told, the word suing is very good, being first at something, and then just shed loads of crime and violence. Headlines about women tend to include things like death, rape, killing, usually accompanied by explaining that the person involved is a wife, mother, daughter. So in Wikipedia, on a lexical level, entries on women tend to emphasize that she's a woman, talk about whether she has kids, how she's managed her childcare arrangements, mention that she's a role model, that it's been tough. And on a structural level, depending on which country you look at, there'll be 7 to 12 times more men than women regarded as notable. Well, you could argue men have done more, so it makes sense. But when you look at the other biases, you find that even the women regarded as notable are treated in a different way. So articles about men don't go on about their gender. A woman married to a notable man will almost certainly have her article linked to her husband's. His won't link back to her. So the problem with all this is we cannot escape the advancing use of AI. Modern search and recommendation algorithms exploit both structural and textual information. If the information is skewed and AI scrapes it, well, you can see where we are. When the UN Charter was established in 1945, equality between men and women, it was everywhere. It was all we talked about. In 2023, 7 years away from utter triumph, reaching the nirvana of equality, the UN issued a statement saying it was impossible. The world is failing girls and women by every single measure. So my plan is to try and do something about it. I still have the torch of human rights burning on me. And I have been working on a project called the Mappa Mundi project, named after a world view from 1300 made by German nuns. I wanted to see if there was a different way of inputting and assessing our knowledge about the world, because Wikipedia has proved unfixable. The standard map of the world that we're all used to, produced in 1569 by Gerardus Mercator, had all these very helpful straight lines on it so that sailors and navigators and so on could go as fast as possible to take stuff from other countries, what we in the West call productivity. And Mercator cannot have possibly known that 456 years later, this would still be the standard depiction of the world. And it's mad. I mean, no wonder Trump wants Greenland. It looks enormous. I would have it myself. And throughout the history of the globe, the depiction of the world has been pretty much the same. So you get north on the top, south on the bottom, all the repositories of knowledge telling you that this is what it looks like where we live, all the same orientation, including this one, which I'm about to make out of Lego, because I'm Danish. The truth is, how you orientate the world, how you depict it, makes a difference to how you see the place. Bren Meyer's done a psychologist at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, has done a fantastic study about attitudes to north and south, which reveal that most people think north is up, south is down, and if you had to pick somewhere in a hypothetical city, it would be better to live in the north. It is more desirable. This photograph is a famous NASA image from 1973, taken from space. It was actually taken with the south at the top. I don't know if you can see, because the astronaut was at that angle at the time. So the outline of Africa is from what we're used to, appears to be upside down. And when it was published, NASA realized people were getting upset, so they flipped it in order that the world could look the way everybody thinks it does. What if we created something new? A digital, interactive globe where nobody was at the top. What if you could spin it and you could extract a country and find out how the women are doing? What if we reconsidered what kind of stories we might include to get a full picture of society working? Who might we ask who don't normally get to tell their tale? What if we were able to seek out the commonalities of human life and link them together? Computers can do this, they just don't. The project is currently raising funds for pilot studies. I am driven by a belief that we can help change the world by changing how we view it. And I look at the dictionary that I so wanted to own when I left school and prepared to go out into the world. Words still matter to me. There's a word which is not in the dictionary, which I use a lot. I am woke. Which is a pejorative adjective, and lots of people use it to disparage. It's derived, I don't know if you know this, from African-American English. I'll tell you a very quick story. Back in 1931, a couple of dozen people were stealing a free ride on a freight train in southern United States, mostly a mix of black and white, and a group of white teenagers tried to push all the black boys off, said it was a white man's train, there was a bit of a brawl, the white boys were forced off the train, and so they immediately reported the black boys to the police, and the train was stopped, and the police arrested the black boys. So there were 2 young white women also on the train. They faced charges of vagrancy and illegal sexual activity, and in order to escape them, they falsely accused the boys of rape. And the 9 lads were charged, and the case was heard in Scottsboro, Alabama. They became known as the Scottsboro Boys. It was all done in a rush. They had poor legal representation. All but One 13-year-old were convicted of rape and sentenced to death in the electric chair. That was the common sentence in Alabama at the time for black men convicted of raping white women. Trials and retrials for years and years and years. Collectively, this group of boys served 100 years in prison, innocent boys with posthumous pardons finally granted in 2013. In 1938, the black American folk singer-songwriter known as Leadbelly wrote a song about them, the Scottsboro Boys, and in the recording he used the phrase "stay woke" as part of the spoken afterword. He had met the boys and he was warning of the potential dangers of black Americans from the power of white America, declaring, "I advise everybody be a little careful when they go along. Best stay woke, keep your eyes open." So the woke referred to the dangers of racial prejudice and discrimination, and it has come to be used in a broader awareness of social inequalities such as sexism and denial of LGBT rights. I have had enough death threats myself to know the need to be woke. Alan Turing reported a theft to the police, but found himself to be the one in trouble. He was, as you said, not shy about his homosexuality. It should not have been his burden to have to fear the police would arrest him when he showed up to report a crime. This is from the local paper, 1952. He was convicted of gross indecency and offered a choice of chemical castration or prison. And he died most likely from suicide 2 years after he began the course of treatment. There's a government website celebrating Turing, created by the Conservative administration in 2021, talks about the impossibly cruel choice he faced after his conviction, talks about how the LGBT plus liberation movement, which began in the 1970s, has campaigned ever since for equal rights for lesbian, gays, bis, trans, queer, all people, queer people. But now, 4 years later, all of these ideas are busy being derided. And the term woke is being used by the political right to discredit individuals and policies they consider to be overly progressive. It is an insult which has been weaponized as part of a backlash against changing cultural norms, and I'm telling you, it is coming here. Last month, the Washington Post reported that 2 US-based researchers from Europe withdrew their names from a scientific paper due to be published in a Royal Society journal because they feared retaliation and even deportation under the current political climate. The subject matter, evolution. So we can sit and watch books gradually being banned, topics overlooked, research closed down, or we can do something about it. Now, some of you may know I have put my hat in the ring to be the next Chancellor of this august place. Unsurprisingly, the insults are already firing in my direction. A man with a very similar wide-ranging career as mine is a polymath, and well, let's not go there. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, but I am used to it. Shun me or slight me, I will not be quiet, because I believe we are in a dangerous place. I learnt the hard way that you have to dare to stand up and speak out. And I try to do so calmly and thoughtfully and just occasionally in a way that lightens the mood. So in the past 2 years in this place, it's been my delight to spend time not just with the fellows, but the students here, as well as the amazing staff who make this place function, all equally important. Now is the time we need to pull together, and I want to play a part in that. Plus, you know, I'm a woman, I'll keep the place tidy, so... Words matter. How we use them to define a problem, a thought, each other. What I'm trying to create with the help of wonderful, wonderful friends here in Cambridge is mad. The Mappa Mundi project is huge, but it can be done. And I was inspired by the dictionary. Women played a vital role in making of that dictionary, and hardly anybody ever talks about it. In fact, when a dinner was held to commemorate the publication, after 71 years of work, only men were invited, and 3 of the women who had devoted their lives to the dictionary watched the ceremony from a balcony. James Murray, the primary editor of the book, would not have taken it on if his wife, Ada, had not persuaded him to do so. Until his death in 1915, she dealt with all his dictionary-related correspondence and papers, and looked after their 11 children. And amongst the brood, Hilda Murray, seated there on the left, who was sent to Oxford High School when the headmistress Lucy Salisbury opposed women's access to university degrees. She said her job at school was to make fine women who will be fine wives and mothers. Hilda never married. But she pursued a distinguished academic career, ending up, and here is how the world is curious, as vice mistress of Girton College, Cambridge. She believed in the impossible project of writing down every word in the English language, and I believe she would have loved what we're trying to do. I do wonder what Turing would have made of the world today. I would love to have asked him, one of the most innovative and powerful thinkers of the 20th century, who died a criminal in 1954. We will never know what other great innovations he might have been responsible for. Britain didn't take its first steps towards decriminalising homosexuality until 1967, and the laws that he was convicted under were not revoked until 1994, coincidentally the year I first came out. I have seen positive change, but it is not an exaggeration to say that there is a present-day epidemic fear and distrust in the queer community. A few months ago, a trans colleague of my wife's, who I knew, took her own life, and there are many who fear that knocking the T off LGBT is just the beginning. It is a well-founded worry, for it is a long history. And if you think this does not affect you personally, please hear the warning signs of what is in the air and remember the scientists trying to study evolution. Alan Turing never got to give all the lectures that he should have. So I have to be honest, I felt obliged to come. This is a plea for all of us to stand up to prejudice, to consider our choices carefully, to allow yourself to wonder if there is a more creative solution to what might seem an intractable problem, and whatever our focus in life, look out for bias of all kinds. Be awake, my friends. So today's VE Day, just by chance, and I wanted to celebrate it. I was very pleased I managed to get a very small pink gin, which I thought was quite a gay gin, I thought. It was quite a freely available at Waterloo Station. I don't normally drink gin, but we nearly ran computers off them. So here's to Alan Turing. Thank you.
Sandi, that was a very inspiring talk, and I really want to thank you. But also I want to open up the audience questions. We have hands coming up already. I think there's somebody with a microphone. Passed along.
Does anybody drink gin? I don't really drink gin. It's quite. Do you need gin? It's quite. I mean, has anybody got a cut? We could put it as anaesthetic. I know, it's great. Right, where are we? Hi, darling, what's your name? Oh, I know your name. Yes, hello. Hello, I know Sophie was very nice to me today.
Thank you so much, Sandi. That was incredible. I kind of just wanted to ask you a question about humour, I think it can be difficult sometimes to know when to use it in circumstances when you're tackling bias and prejudice, and you did it so wonderfully well during that presentation, the balance between humour and seriousness. So I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts on how we can know when to use humour.
I think it's essential, and I think the Greeks fully understood this when they had the drama and the comedy and the tragedy masks next to each other. It's part of who we are, and we mustn't be afraid of it. I think part of the problem, a lot of arguments have become very po-faced. So I think we mustn't be scared of using a joke. And for me, when nobody would speak to me, the fact that I was in the footlights and I was doing funny things, it really irritated them because I was carrying on being amusing, lightly. And I think it's important. But people mistake you if they think the fact that you can be funny means that you are not deeply serious about what you are doing. I have tried my whole career, as I say, it's nearly 45 years now, to not do jokes at other people's expense, to not be cruel, to try and consider maybe just the alternative way of looking at something. And my dream always is to not pummel people into believing what I believe in, which is equality for everybody and not just for a few select people. I don't pummel people into it. I try and say, come with me, I'm a perfectly reasonable person, and why we might even have a good time on the way. So yeah, it's a secret weapon, but we need it, particularly at the moment. I can't tell you how depressed a lot of people are, and I know this from talking to people who do pastoral care at the university. There are a lot of the kids who are struggling with their mental health. Humour is a great way, but all creativity. Well, we had a lovely thing in the social science department. I went in and we got all the kids to make maps from their point of view of the world, right? And we were really laughing because most of the boys put their favourite coffee shop right in the middle, or the pub right in the middle of their map. But we had a beautiful woman of African origin, and she did a drawing of her face with a big African scarf on, and that was the image of the world that she wanted to present. We laughed a lot, and there was a lot of silliness with crayons, but we also learned a lot about each other. So I think it's a means to an end. Hi, what's your name?
My name's Ned.
Hi, Ned. Do you want gin? Do you want some gin?
I'm okay, but thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. I feel a little bit tipsy already. I had like one. Okay.
Thanks again for a really engaging and interesting talk. Something that stood out to me, I am from Herefordshire, and the Mappa Mundi is in Hereford Cathedral.
Yes, there is. Well, it's a different one. This one is from. There are many. Well, not many. There are quite a few. The nuns had nothing else to do. Literally 1300. What should we do now? Let's make another map. Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to ask you what you think are some of the most important unheard voices to put into this project and to sort of share with the world.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we're looking at. I spend a lot of time with a friend of mine, Zara Joya, who runs Rukshana Media, which if you haven't looked at it, please do so. She's an Afghan refugee journalist, and she's running a wonderful website in English telling us what are the stories of Afghan women at the moment. So one of our plans, and I have my wonderful team here, is to do 2 pilot projects, one in the UK and one in Afghanistan, so that we can see the extremes of life for women and see what are the things that we want to go and look for. What are the metrics? How might we gather these best? I have a dream. I've been to some really remote parts of the world. Pretty much everybody, even in remote parts of the world, has got a mobile phone. I would love people to shoot the story, 1.5 minutes of a woman. I met an incredible woman in Ghana. She's a teacher, and she had to walk for an hour to the well every morning and an hour back again to get water for her kids, because she said if they're thirsty, they won't listen to me. And I would love to just film her. Those are the stories we don't hear. Those are the things that we need. But this is an exploration at the moment as to how we can find a new way of doing this. I just had an offer from a university in Iceland who had seen my talk that I gave at Darwin, saying, please, can we start a pilot project in Iceland? So I'm hoping universities around the world might be a source for us to try and see how this works. The fact that I don't know exactly how to do it is fine. It doesn't mean that we can't do it. They started the Oxford Dictionary with 54 holes, pigeonholes and slips of paper. And it was good enough for them. We can start there. But I can show you, this is very exciting. We have just got our first funding page up. And if you take a photograph of that, is that right? We'll take a photograph of that. It'll link you through. So we are beginning to look professional. Anybody else? Yes. Hi, darling. What's your name?
I'm Michael.
Hi.
Hi. I feel slightly intimidated saying this directly behind the librarian and the archivist, but a lot of what you're saying kind of comes down to how we organize and label information. And a lot of what you said in your lecture hinges on the more sort of ideological outgrowths of that, like freedom of expression, freedom of thought, thinking before we speak, considering other people. And those are amazing things, but I'm wondering about the biggest obstacles you face when you're trying to make what is effectively, an alternative way of organizing and storing information. Like, how do you make that exciting to other people, and what obstacles do you face?
Well, maybe I haven't made this really clear. It's not really about organising, and it's about the actual writing it down in the first place, which is not happening. So women are held to a completely different standard, and the example that I often give is the Canadian physicist Donna Strickland. And Donna Strickland, endlessly people tried to get a Wikipedia biography page in for her, and she kept being deleted as not notable enough, right? So nobody would write about her life because she wasn't notable enough. Her page went up in October 2018 on the day she won the Nobel Prize. So maybe we're being held to a slightly different standard. So what I'm trying to do is to shame people into understanding that it isn't just how we organize it or present it, marvelous stuff that you do, it's the very thing that we write down. And we need to think about the words that we use when we write it down. And I'm encouraging everybody, you must all work in many different fields, but it will come up for absolutely everybody in this room. Have a think. Is there something I missed? Is there some other way of expressing this? So organization, yes, but it really isn't an organizational task. It's that stuff's missing. We're missing the story of half of humanity. Women represent 0.5% of all recorded history. And we were there. Somebody must have cooked the Last Supper. Literally. You look at that picture, that table's a lot of crumbs. A lot of crumbs. Somebody is in there. Get rid of that. So yes, on organizational, but we have to write the stuff down in the first place. Oh, I wouldn't not choose her if I was you. I would definitely, like, do you work here? Well, choose her, yeah, choose her. Yeah.
I don't want to leave from it.
It's coming.
I just want to thank you for an absolutely brilliant talk, which I think deserved a standing ovation. I also forgot to mention, by the way, that we're very grateful to the Stanley Foundation for backing this. But
Are they the ones with the cups? No.
Exactly. My question is this. You said that you think the backlash we're seeing in America is coming over to Europe. Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask you to expand on why you think that is the case. And are there any countries that you admire at the moment as examples that are actually going forward in a progressive way rather than sliding backwards? I mean, can you give us any reasons for cheer?
Oh, okay, that. Not my stories to tell, but I have several people who have had many dealings with academia in the United States who it has been made very clear are no longer welcome to come to America. And the fact that it has been mentioned that American funding might be withdrawn from projects here, and I think that study, those European scientists studying evolution who decided not to publish, I think these are all very, very frightening things. Are there places for cheer? Look, if you look, I hate to go on because I'm Danish about Scandinavia, but if you look at the places that are the happiest in the world, that year after year after year are highest on the happiness index, it's the countries with the highest degree of equality. It's not a chance thing. The thing that makes us happy, actually, is not more money and, ruling the world. It's simple things like having enough food, having a low infant mortality rate, having, women survive childbirth and preeclampsia. It's all of those things. So I think you can see examples of where it works. It's just not spreading at the moment. It isn't spreading. So I have days where I'm not optimistic, but then I come here. And I see different departments working together. I see connections that have been made between very different disciplines who've suddenly decided, actually, we're all going to do this and we're going to find a new way of doing it. We did honestly spend 15 minutes at one point discussing which department had fiduciary responsibility. I wasn't really listening, but but I love that it's happening, and it's happening. What we're doing is new here with the Mappa Mundi project, and if we can do it, maybe other departments could reach out to each other. Instead of living in silos, we could say, well, I know this thing, what do you know? What can you do? We could have, this is the place for it, for crazy thoughts, for innovation.
Pass this back down 2 rows. Yeah, thank you. Just behind you, Ken, up to the wall. Yeah. Thank you.
Don't fight. What's your name?
I was just wondering...
What's your name?
Oh, Martha.
Hi, I always feel rude to just not say hi.
Sorry, it's my fault. I was just wondering, I'm aware the senior tutor's in front of me, but I have spent a lot of time arguing with people who have more power than me over the last few years.
Go, girl.
And I was just wondering sort of what, and I'm aware you're not a therapist, but sort of what do you do...
My wife's a therapist.
When sort of people don't take you seriously and using humour feels like pandering to people who don't take you seriously, and how do you basically not get depressed? And if you're not depressed, how do you not get bitter and then make sure people still listen to you?
I hear you. I think the only advice I can give you is that you have to carry on speaking your truth because people will recognize it. It's absolutely essential. I mean, we talked about humor. I don't regard it as pandering. I regard it as part of the lubrication of keeping life going. Sure, it's easy to dismiss. People can dismiss me if they want to, or they could look at what I've actually done. I'm the author of 30 books. I've got a play on in the West End's been there 6 years. I mean, I've done a lot of stuff. Most women don't stand up and go, "Yay, look at me." I have, I don't know how many honorary doctorates and things. But that's not the point. Is what I try and do when I stand up is, I'm telling you what I actually think. And do that, okay? And of course it's tough. I understand you, I see you. But there's a lot of people that you can speak to. And my best advice to you if you get low is open your door, go outside, ask for somebody to help you, or just have a coffee. And honestly, it might be not another student, but the fabulous. I've made friends with the fabulous staff here who are just incredible. Reach out, it's a community of people. But please don't get low. Are you low? I don't want you. You're fine. Oh, okay. I suddenly felt responsible. Is she okay? Is she? Oh, my wife says you're fine. My wife says you're fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Very good. But speak truth. That's what I say.
And Amanda, I think the senior tutor had her hand up earlier.
Is that good?
No? Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Good. Okay.
Oh, yes, he has to speak.
One last question.
He's my friend.
I've got a few thank yous too.
Oh, sorry, if it's the last question, so it's maybe not short enough.
No, but can I just say how much I like your socks? They're really... So, look, I've got Scandi socks on as well. They're very good. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, sorry. That was...
Wikipedia is famously open.
Yeah.
Anybody can write. But it feels, Sandi, as though if the Mappa Mundi were open, it's going to be trolled.
Yeah.
So what do you do about that, and how do you make it honest and inclusive, and at the same time protect it?
No, absolutely, and this is something that we think about a lot, and we also think about how can it be accessed by people who don't necessarily have a Wi-Fi all the time, and so there are things like that. We have 3 pillars of its creation. We have the tech, which is we're going to need a lot of computer understanding. We have data, so we're working with CAMFED and UN Women in order to make sure that we get the most up-to-date data. And then the third thing, and this is the thing with the pilot programs, we're looking at the curation of the project. So there are 3 pillars to it. How can we curate this so that it's fair, so that it's representative, and so that the stories that we're looking for get told? And I think until we do the pilot project, it will be impossible to answer those questions. What I'm looking for ultimately is a template of, say, 10 things, and we need to know those 10 things about women in every country in the world. And that would be a starting point. Because, for example, one of the things if I said to you, if I had this interactive globe, and I said to the globe, show me where in the world domestic violence went up during COVID. Well, I can never get politicians to pay attention. I've spoken at the European Parliament, I've spoken at the British Parliament. They might pay attention when I ask that question, and the entire world lights up. It went up 25% in every country in the world. Right? That's shocking. But imagine if we had an interactive globe that showed us that. I think that is the sort of thing that would stop people and go, okay, that's not good. I didn't know that. So it's about connecting the dots of everybody, and it's also about telling the news stories. I don't have a full answer for you, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that because that's what we're fundraising for. We're fundraising to work out how we know we need it. And I have spoken now, I don't know, I mean, I've given maybe 100 talks about this. And everybody I've spoken to, I just gave a big talk at the Royal Geographical Society. What can we do? They said. We want to help you with this. Everybody knows the need. Now we need the money so that we can get on with the project.
So I have a list of thank yous.
Shall I go away now?
No, well, the first person I want to thank is you, Sandi.
Oh, that's very kind.
For your strength, for your courage.
Thank you.
For your talk. Really appreciate it. So if everyone can... I know we already had a big clap.
Thank you very much. Oh, okay.
I'd also like to thank everyone here, for the audience, your great questions, for coming to, taking on the challenge to, further that fight against inequality. I would like to thank the Stanley Foundation, as the Provost said, who has been supporting the Turing Lecture since 2018. I would like to thank the Turing Committee and Tim, the Chair, for putting this all together, and also the Development Office, who've been working tirelessly behind the scenes, making sure everything goes smoothly. So on that note, there are drinks outside, so I'm not going to hold you any further from those, and have a lovely evening.